Are there any public comments on agenda-related items? Public comments are limited to 5 minutes. Anybody want to step forward? Seeing none. We're going to go right into the discussion on Parks Reservation System. City Manager Bill Gambles.
Thank you, Mayor. So I passed out and I have on the screen a draft of a Lions Pavilion rental agreement. This has outlined a tentative kind of policy procedure for renting out the Lions Pavilion. Just want to thank Tim O'Connor, Jeff McCula, Ed Bradford, and Laura Laurelin, our deputy clerk, for their input on this. So just kind of walking through this a little bit. The beginning of it, this was kind of based off of the marina contract we have for renting out the room there. And I think the process we were looking at and working with Ed, we were talking about how we could implement this and then kind of build on it later. We're going to be using the Outlook calendar. We can kind of have a reservation put in there, print out the calendar as needed, and then we'll have a display case at the pavilion that it can be updated, every Thursday if and when needed. So everyone would know who has, who is reserved the Lions Pavilion at a certain time. They can also, and it'll be in a case too. I think that's the other thing. Jeff mentioned that there's a $600 case that we could put up in the place of this cork board with the tax. That'll be a better, more secure location. So the big thing is you'd call in, you could make a reservation. I think it wouldn't be finalized till we receive the contract back and the required fees. I think the way they do it for the marina is it's tentative till they get that final contract and the fees. And just because we would post the upcoming schedule every Thursday, we'd want that information before, I think we're looking for it the Wednesday before the rental. At the bottom, you see there's a couple of things too. We looked at some of these in different areas such as Royal Oak, Kent County, and one thing they had was a priority for residents. So for example, this one stated first working day in January to March 31st, residents could make a reservation. So for any time in August, if they wanted to pick a day after April 1st, then you would have it opened up to non-residents. So we'd have a priority for residents. And then at the bottom, you see kind of a preliminary rate structure that we discussed. A full day, 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. And there was some debate about the times, but just for purposes of discussion, and then a half day, we could have 9 to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. There is some, I think, talking about the parks with Jeff, he was thinking that 11 a.m. they could make sure that they'd have all the garbage cleaned up, or having all the trash cans serviced in the area, but we're asking later in this agreement that it's people who rent to actually clean up their debris, put it into a garbage dumpster nearby. So we're hoping that they would adhere to that. Some other items in here we kind of follow if it's a private event. We try to put a lot of the parks rules into this document, and that's why I gave you a copy of those. Talking with the Parks Commission with Tim O'Connor, there's probably a couple areas that need to be updated. They say no fires on the beach. We of course have fire pits now, so it's just there's a couple small areas. But just kind of an overview. We have some parks rules, the expectations. Alcohol is permitted. No sale of alcohol. If there's a group running the pavilion and there's sale of items, they'd have to provide insurance. So just some of the, and I mentioned after the event, so park rules, park closes at 11. There's a noise ordinance that would be enforced, so we'd ask that they'd be done at that time. That's kind of the basic policy we came up with. I'd like to open it up for any questions or discussion at this time.
Obviously, I haven't had time to read it word for word.
Okay.
But on the rental fees, when you're talking about non-residential rate and resident, are we talking about anybody who's in the county as a resident, or are you talking about just city?
City, I mean.
I think it was City of Manistee.
So how are we gonna enforce these rules? If someone violates a rule, what's the process for violation? I don't know if it's in here, I didn't get that far yet.
And enforcement is a big item. We say if there's any damage, they'd be assessed. I think the easy thing is to say they wouldn't be allowed to rent it again if it's substantial. But I think they probably, I don't know how we deal with that at the marina, but it's.
So at the marina, because it's an indoor location and there's more things that can get damaged, we actually require a security deposit. But we discussed that at length here, and it makes the process twice as difficult administratively if we have a security deposit. So we just made it a deposit that's non-refundable. I think Dave's question though is what if there's two groups down there that are having a conflict rather than maybe what the enforcement is for the actual rules? Because the pavilion, there's just not that much there. I mean, there's some tax and things like that. There's really not a lot that could get damaged any more than would be on any non-reserved event. But, you know, I guess there could be conflicts potentially. And I guess at that point, if there was a complaint, you know, maybe you'd have to get Josh involved or something to kind of regulate that, or maybe one of the parks guys. We didn't really discuss that in specific details.
And we did kind of leave an hour gap between with the half day, just so there could be some clearing out of people and setup time.
I noticed it says that you can't park on the grass, but they all park on the grass. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah, I think we were trying to limit the amount of cars growing right up to the pavilion.
I get it, but if you don't enforce it first day, you're gonna get it every time. So I don't know if that is something that we're actually gonna deal with, or if it's not, I don't know how they're gonna deal with that. Because they'll park, the fish guys will park 20 cars in the Lions Pavilion in a camper. They'll park a camper in there, so we need to make sure either we're gonna either enforce it or not have it, because if it's a waste of paper if we're not gonna do something, follow up on it, make them move that stuff out of there.
I think that the things like the fishing tournament, the Forest Festival, Labor Fest, those are all special event requests. So they have a different set of rules than what this would have, and because they bring those requests to the council for approval. But what we're trying to do is deter how many vehicles are driving in there, and it's a sandy area, it ruts it up, it makes a mess, so. You know, and it's no different, I think, than the fire pits. There's rules with those fire pits. And we've got officers and city staff that are driving around and monitoring those things. And as far as the conflict, if somebody has it rented and somebody else shows up, I don't see that being a major issue, because right now it's basically done on an honor system. People post that note card on the bulletin board. It's not a reservation, but it says, I intend to have my birthday party here on this date. And maybe a couple times a summer we have issues with people that are upset because they wanted to do something and somebody else had the card, or they took the card down. But I think we would deal with those conflicts the same way. And once you read this completely, it does say while you're there and occupying it, you keep your contract with you. So if somebody has a dispute, you're able to say, well, I rented it, here's my signed agreement. And then we can put some contact numbers on here probably in case there is an issue.
Are the dates gonna be booked off for like 4th of July and Labor Fest and?
Yeah, we discussed reaching out to all the special events that have come before council the last few years and sending them notice ahead of time, so we can block out those dates in the calendar and they're not able to be rented ahead of time.
What are we gonna do if there's a wedding on the beach and they're renting it and they're serving alcohol, but they're not selling it? How is that handled?
Well, it's not illegal.
Okay, well, I'm just, having never done one, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a legal question, but as that operates today, we allow alcohol in the parks, and weddings do occur at those locations. And as long as they're not selling it, I don't think it's illegal.
Okay,
It's not illegal.
And I think for larger events too, we ask them to contact, if they're going to be spilling over past the pavilion, to contact the Parks Department and just let us know the setup so we can take a look at it. But yeah, alcohol was not going to be, if it's a wedding and it's free, that wasn't going to be a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Who's going to get the rental money?
That's a good question. We can, yeah, I think it's to be determined.
So my concern is, and I've mentioned this before, is the Lions Pavilion is unlike the marina. There was no tax dollars used to build that property. It was all done with the Lions Club and donations. So now we're going to turn around and charge the same people who actually built it with their bare hands and paid for it with their money. I think we've got an issue. And I can't really think that it's fair and reasonable. Unlike, like I said, something that you can say, well, it was built with taxpayer money. This is not the case.
It's on city property.
It's on city property, I granted, but you see what I'm saying?
Right.
This is-
And maybe it does get dedicated to the stage or the concert venue or something like that. So,
Right, and actually, if you read, it was given to, for the general use of the city and the public. I don't disagree with having a deposit, but I think going from zero to a hard rental agreement, I think might be a lot for the public to accept, and not quite sure after how many 20 years of not charging.
Yeah, but you're only charging them $100 if it needs repairs, and then you're charging the city, and you're going and saying, hey, it needs $20,000 in repairs, and now we want the city to pay for it. They're not gonna be happy about that either. So if you charge non-residents $150 to use it, and you put it in a pool and say, hey, we're gonna put it back into the Lions Club, why can't we do that?
Well, like I said, I think that having, I get it. Again, there are certainly been issues with people not properly maintaining the facility after they use it. But like I said, there are a lot of people who spent tens of thousands of their dollars to build and construct it with the intent that it not be a rental operation, but be an open and free pavilion for the community at large.
Right, but where's the money gonna come from when it needs repairs?
Well, right now, the money coming from repairs has come from the Lions Club, for the most part.
But eventually that money's gonna run out.
Well, it hasn't so far.
Has anyone discussed this with the people of the Lions Pavilion that,
It has not gone to the Lions Club.
do they have input on that, do you think?
Well, not officially, but like I said, I think there's some concern with taking something that was built to be given, and now you start charging for it.
Well, I think the reason we have to try to maintain some order there is because we went to a very quaint reservation system with a bulletin board. And that's been allowable for years. So we're just trying to make sure that it is now handled in a more efficient manner.
And I totally agree with the whole reservation policy. I'm just concerned that we are taking something that was given to the community as a free use and are now charging for it.
How were the fees figured out? How was the rate?
I mean, we debated a couple different lower prices, and then I think looking at some of the other communities, they were higher. So it was, I think Tim kind of recommended based on, the Parks Commission kind of recommended based on kind of seeing what other places are charging, kind of a higher rate to get some money back. And I think probably the intent was to go back into the parks, but we didn't have that formal discussion.
Did other communities have it by the pavilion or the Lions Pavilion or other clubs like that.
So, for example, Royal Oak had, it was kind of a park pavilion, so I don't know. I don't know necessarily if it is this exact similar situation where a nonprofit group created a pavilion and then running it. I know when we first discussed this at a work session, it was to start with this Lions Pavilion as an example of for renting out some of these spaces in the park. But yeah, those were generally just just park pavilions.
Do we charge for ball fields?
We don't charge for any of those facilities.
That's my point.
This is a structure that we've allowed people to rent and tie up so that other public can't use it when they're having their parties. So I don't think it's unfair to think about a fee. I'm looking at these and I think a half-day event probably handles most of what the traffic has been down there in the past. Do we have any idea how many times it was rented bulletin board wise, say, in the last couple of years?
Then nobody kept track of it.
We don't track that
Right,
information
but-
at all.
But it wasn't unusual to go down there and take a look at the bulletin board and say, I need it from
Yeah.
9 to 11 and from 12 to 2 or whatever. So it wasn't like large all-day affairs.
Are you looking to make the cheaper rental use?
Well, like I said, I thought that when we had originally discussed it, it was going to be a deposit and not necessarily a rental. And kind of protecting the property and still having something that locks somebody in, so that they wouldn't just tie up a date or a time and expect it to be theirs.
What would it look like if we attempted to use this without a fee? Just to reserve it without a fee, to start off with. I mean, I don't know.
That's an option. I think what the Parks Commission was asking was to make this more of a fundraiser type, but I think that's definitely something we can look at. So.
Just to address some of your concerns from what I've been hearing, I think one of the reasons that we decided to put a rate on is to prevent people from just reserving time and not showing up. You know, saying I want this date and time, it gives them ownership, basically is what it does. We discussed the possibility of deposits versus rental agreements, and I think anytime you charge, obviously, city residents, there's gonna be some type of backlash for that, but I agree with the city council member that there's going to need to be funds eventually to upkeep, to paint, roof. I mean, I think we need to be thinking about those things in the future and just being a little bit more proactive versus reactive. So, you know, whether initially we charge non-residents and maybe the city residents even a little bit less, I mean, I'd leave that all up to you guys, but I think we have a revenue, weddings, you know, special events that we could be using this for that are the betterment for Manistee, for not only for downtown, but also for the park. But I think that the rate is important to put in there. I think obviously it can be flexible as far as what we do. But like we said, that's pretty minimal to charge somebody $100 for lakeshore, you know, rental, you know, along our beaches. I don't think you can find that anywhere, to be quite honest with you. But I think it's going to be a culture shock because they've used to getting something for free, but it just doesn't work that way. I mean, no one has the money to do the upkeeps that needs to be done. Honestly, if you look at our beaches, they're in bad shape now. We can get some revenue to start changing some of that stuff. I think that's the direction that the Parks Commission would like to go. So I'd like to see the rental fee the same for non-residents, but I think obviously the city residents can be negotiable. You know how we talk about that, but kind of start things out very slowly. Like I said, I think it's a good proposal, but I think it's going to be a significant impact for what we're going to be doing in the future, you know, with some of the other properties too, that we can do the same thing to. So just trying to set the guideline is what we're trying to do. Got any questions for me at all? No. I just want to thank Bill and Jeff and Ed for all the work that we did putting into this, because as you well know, this is one of our projects that the Parks Commission really wants to get going on this. It's been talked about for several years. we're just kind of like, we want to put that to the end and start moving forward. And I think this is a good beginning for that, to be honest with you, so.
So maybe somebody can reach out to the Lions Club and see how they feel about that.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, in conversations, the Lions did a great job putting it together. They donated to the city of Manistee, and the city of Manistee has ownership of it. I think to have them participate in it is great, but it's we own it. We got to take care of it. We got to maintain it. I mean, I'm like, it's to the memberships over there. I don't know if they still want to be involved in that decision making. As far as even consider, I don't even think they want to be a part of this, do they? Reynolds?
You know, they didn't, you know, they've never intended to have it as
No.
a rental.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I know that, but in going forward, I think this is a golden opportunity that they've given us, the Lions. They gave this to us. I think there's just so much more that we can do with it, you know, and have it benefit the city of Manistee so much more. You know, I just think we're losing out by not having something like this in place. But then, like I said, I think this is going to be a catalyst for other projects that we have planned.
So at the same time, are we planning on having a rental at the gazebo on the, across from
Sure.
First Street Beach at the same time?
Yeah, I think we talked, didn't we, Jeff? We want to start with this and kind of get this as a model, and then,
Because, well, my concern is that if this is going to be charged and that one's going to be free, guess what? Everyone's going to go to the free. And it's you're on the same beach.
correct. I think it's something that we need to look at. You know, the Parks Commission is pretty involved in this, so, but I think that we're just trying to do those baby steps first and just trying to get something established so we have something to go by, you know, so we can expand it a little bit further, so.
Well, I think people enjoyed it for so long, but they're, like you said, it comes to the work has got to be put in. The money's got to be someplace for repairs. So I agree with the non-resident deal. The resident, I think I'd reduce a little bit, so.
And that might be a compromise to reduce the rates for the residents. At least, you know, you can always raise them
Right.
incrementally and take away a little bit of the sticker shock to people who have been using these facilities for years and years.
One of the items that you brought up was a deposit, and when we had our internal discussions, the biggest problem with the deposit is we have no way of enforcing that. We don't staff it 7 days a week, so there's nobody that can check people out, if you will. And so we have no ability to say, well, you get your deposit back, or no, you didn't because you broke this or left it a mess, unless it's reported by other people. So it would be really hard to enforce that.
So how about if we made the resident fee 50 and 25 to begin with?
I think that's kind of low.
It's
but
not a
that's-
huge fee for it all day for $100.
It's for 14 hours of
Other
use.
places you're paying, I mean, you're paying almost that much just to park somewhere. These beaches. So I don't think that it's a huge fee at all, 100 and 150.
I'm sorry, how does this compare to the marina rates? I'm just curious.
120 all day for residents or 150 all day, I believe, for non-residents.
Okay. It's constant.
It's 120 for residents all day plus a $100 security deposit. And for non-residents, it's 150 with a $100 security deposit. And the security deposit is refundable. And there is not a time on that. I don't know if there is a time that we require.
No, it's just the day.
It's just the day, isn't it? Yes.
I think they have to be out by 11.
Is it 11 o'clock? Okay.
And there was discussion about the security deposit for this, just kind of the process of taking in money and then the city having to kind of process a credit card, a check, cash, and then having to write a check back. So it would put a bigger burden on the finance department just to process deposits.
I don't want that.
Well, I can see that there's been a lot of thought going into this. I appreciate the time. I do like the fact that the Manistee residents have priority for the pavilion rental from January 1st through March 31st. I think that's really important because I think most people know a few months in advance if they want to use the pavilion for a big event, so they can do the all-day thing if they want to.
How would that look though? Like if someone's already got it booked, but then a city resident wants it? Like,
Well, if you're not a resident, you're not allowed to book until April 1st.
April 1st.
So maybe a next step would be the Parks Commission reaches out to the Lions Club and just kind of goes over this with them, and we just kind of, I can do a Friday update about where we're at with it.
I'd agree with that.
Okay.
But again, going back to Tim's point, we're doing this out of respect for the Lions Club, but they did give it to the city. So we assumed ownership of it and all of its fees and all of its maintenance going forward in life.
But in reality, the Lions Club has maintained that facility
Right.
since they gave it to the city.
We might be able to
I think that
help them
means,
out with the burden there.
well, we'll see.
With both sides that have a stake in it. So you want to have the meeting and get back to us?
Is there anything else you wanted to add to this?
I think it was a very useful discussion. I think, we have a couple steps to take now with, we'll talk with the Parks Commission about the feedback as well, and see what comes out of it next.
The next meeting is Thursday this week, so 2 more days.
I think everything else, I mean, you covered the insurance, you covered damages, you've covered what's allowable, cleaning, you've covered everything that I think we'd want to see in a contract. So I appreciate all the due diligence that went into this.
Now, would there be something on here also for special events to go past 11 o'clock? Because the entertainment events usually run after 11.
We did kind of lean on the park rules for some of those items, and that was one, the ending time of 11.
In the past, the special event request has superseded those park rules. So if it's specific to the special event request, if you recall, we've had obviously concert slate, we've had camping down there. So when it's specific to the special event request and approved by council, that supersedes. Okay.
All right. Next, we're going to have a discussion on water bill. Ed Bradford, you're up.
Council, there had been some questions from a couple residents about the timing of of water bills and how that process worked. So I put in your packet a memo, and I work closely with Kaylee, who's the utility billing clerk, who is also here tonight and can answer more detailed questions if there are any, some information about the billing process. I guess I want to preface this with saying, I think, one, our billing process works very well and is very smooth, and the residents understand it. We have issues occasionally with new residents, but our process isn't abnormal. It's in line with what a lot of monthly billed utilities are. But I did put a memo in there that explained the process and some of the issues we have and how we've tried to address them. And I put a schedule in here that shows what the billing cycle would look like over the next 3 months. I think one of the biggest areas that people express concerns about, and it's something that's really out of the control of the city, is a lot of people are using bill pay services from their banks. And so they'll get online and they'll enter their bill and they'll process it, and they think that that payment, magically gets into the city's coffers in a day or two. When in reality, the bank has to take that payment, they batch it, they process it, they print checks, they stuff envelopes, and they mail them to us. And so we may not get that bill or that check until even after the due date. And Kaylee has lots of instances where we've gotten those payments late, and she saves those envelopes because she invariably knows that the customers are going to ask about it. The other thing we do is we really try to encourage all of the utility customers to sign up for our auto debit program, because that allows us to take the payments out, and then there's no worry about them being late. The customer just has to make sure that the money is in the account. But we also offer options for credit card payments. We have drop boxes that people can make it, and we make it very convenient to pay. I don't know if there's any specific questions that you'd like addressed, or Kaylee can help to answer those too. But we've never really gone through this before with City Council, or at least not in a long time. This gives you a good idea of kind of what that process looks like. There was one other specific question, which was, why is my bill come out 2 weeks after the billing date or the read date at the end of the period? And that's because there's a whole lot of processing that has to happen after those reads are put in. There's review, there's manual reads, there's auditing to make sure if there's abnormal reads that are high or low, she might have to have somebody go back and reread them. There's doing the billing process, printing the bills, getting them mailed. So that's the way that has been, and pretty much for the whole 20 years that I've been here, and before that, at least until we switched over from quarterly billing. So I don't know if you have any specific questions. Like I said, I do have Kaylee here, but it's just kind of an overview for council as to how the process works.
Well, I get my utility bills and they always give me 2 weeks to pay it. I don't know what the water people are complaining about it. You just gotta pay the bill.
At the end of the day, that's often what that boils down to. I mean,
I think the concern was that the mail is getting slower.
Oh, I understand.
yeah.
So if they think it's gonna get there in 2 days, it gets there in 5, and then they're late.
And we do, and we have a small office. I can hear Kaylee talking to customers, and she emphasizes that with the customers. Practically everyone she talks to, she lets them know what the other payment options are if they're concerned about the mail, and encourages them to sign up for auto debit. And you can see, I think we've done pretty well with that. We've got, let's see if I can find this statistic. So we've got almost 25% of our customer accounts that are signed up for auto debit. And that's a huge bonus for us, because it takes away the processing that many checks each month. It just goes through electronically. And then we have quite a few of them that'll pay with credit cards up to $400 a month. So we'd like to switch them over to auto debit, but some people don't want to do that. They're just not comfortable with it. But we get more and more every year, so that's a positive thing. But that's one way you can avoid the mail. And of course, you can always drop your payment in the drop box. We don't even have to be here, and we'll process those payments. So we do give a variety of options.
I'm one of the weirdos, though. I come in person. I pay my water bill, I pay my property taxes at the window. For some reason, I just think I have the time in my life to do it, and I like dropping in on you guys.
So a big thing for me right now is that I'm trying to get as many email addresses as I can, because I email the bills out the same day that I send the bills in the mail. And so I'm able to email and also send a paper bill. So when I'm getting new residents that are calling, my biggest push right now is to let them know their payment options, first of all, and then I ask them for a valid email address. If they want to be paperless, they can be paperless. And if they want to receive the paper bill and an email, then I have that proof of I did send you a bill.
Well, how many people do stop in and pay their bills in person? Because I usually see other people doing it.
There are, COVID did a lot of change for that though. So the drop box is being utilized a lot more, which is good. But there are a lot of people that also have been signing up for the ACH withdrawal that I push through on the 10th of every month. And that's one big thing that I push, because of the fact that if you're paying through your bank, some banks will sit on those checks for a week until they have a stack, and then they'll mail me a stack. So whether you paid on the 1st, they're mailing it on the 8th, and then it's getting to me potentially the day that bills are due or the day after. So.
This data here you have, could you explain that to me? I don't fully understand. It says meters read.
Yeah, so today was our meter read day.
Okay,
Normally, the guys read every single day.
okay,
So I'm able to tell people what their reads are. If they call and say, I think I have a leak going on, we read every single day. We have one main day that we really go out and we manually read and we get all of the reads that we can. So that was today for December.
okay.
From there, I have to wait until tomorrow to be able to export the reads and then import for my billing cycle. And then from that step forward, I go through and I check all the reads. I see if there's high usage. If there is, I send the guys out right away and I try to call the citizen to alert them. Otherwise, the guys beat me to it and the citizens are able to have the guys come in and check things. That's a process though, because they have their other things going on. So I have to work with them on that and when it's convenient for them. So then, as far as that part goes, as soon as I get all of the information that I can from them, then I can proceed on with my billing process. And it's about 25 steps to the billing process. So
Can you walk
a
us,
2-week period.
can you walk us through that? You've done that with me personally, but I think everybody should hear some of that process. So that they, I mean, you're literally working 2 weeks to get all that input in. And to
Well,
get-
and like I said, a lot of it has to do with if so there's a report within my process that I print. It's usually 175 pages. And there are probably 8 to 10 different reads from different accounts on each of those pages. And that tells me the abnormal consumption report. So I'm going through and I'm making sure, did we actually pick up a read from these people? And if we didn't, the guys have to go out. So that's something that when I'm able to get to that step, then I have to wait at least a couple of days. I have to give them a little bit of time to be able to get to the places. So there is a point in that period that I am kind of hanging out and waiting. I do my best to try not to estimate because then that creates phone calls. If I have to, I estimate. But we do our best to get actual reads every single month. The process is, I would have to pull it up to be able to go through it step by step, but I'm happy to email it.
And then how long does it take? You have what, 6,000? I don't know how many customers that you bill out.
Paper bills, I bill out about 3,200, and I email just over 1,000.
Some are both.
And how long does it take you to print the 3,200?
Couple hours. 'Cause there's a process when I'm printing too, that you have to go through, and then you have to save everything, and you journalize everything, and so it's not just the printing, it's the steps within that.
Okay.
Now, is that doing the whole city or is that doing sections of the city?
The whole city.
So I don't know if council has any more questions, but we wanted to kind of give you just an overview, so if citizens have questions, they could find out. But I think the takeaways here, if you're having conversations with customers, is that we have multiple ways to pay. We're happy to talk to the customers about that. And our process is very similar to communities all across the state and all across the country. There's really nothing abnormal about the process. And one other thing I think I'll point out, and this is a kudos to Jeff and the water department and the past city councils and current city councils, is we've funded the ability to get electronic reads. And so now when the guys are just driving around, they're bringing in those reads. So it helps us to identify leaks, and it helps us to do final reads when tenants are moving in and out. It's been a great process. It's saved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a year for the water guys because they're not out there manually having to plug in their device into the side of the building. So it was a lot of money up front, but it's been a great investment. And That's the future, and we did that a number of years ago, so that's been very helpful. If you don't have any more questions, that's all I have for today.
Bradford, just one, just to get an idea, what percentage of people are late paying their bills that are required to have a penalty added?
I can tell you tomorrow.
Okay.
So the penalty is higher than the number of people that ultimately get on the shut-off list, because they'll come in and pay. But another thing to point out is with the COVID pandemic, we waived all penalties and interest on utility bills for almost 15 months.
Okay.
And that cost the city $40,000+. So I don't know that the citizens recognize that, but that was something that we did in an effort to try to lessen the burden, because we knew a lot of people were going through a hard time. And those started back up in July, started paying those, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Consideration of a closed session, union contract negotiations. City Manager William Gamble has requested a closed session this evening as permitted by the Michigan Open Meetings Act, Section 8C, to discuss contract negotiations with the Command Officers Association of Michigan. At this time, council could take action to proceed to closed session under Section 8C of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. I need a motion.
Can I say something before we make a motion?
Is it about this?
No, it's about something, it's not about the closed session.
We missed other.
Okay. Did you do
Mayor.
something?
Yes, I did.
You did go past the other.
I know I did, but no one had approached me to say that they had.
Okay.
Sorry. I have other.
Okay, other.
Okay, so last week we spoke about the school bullying, and I still feel strongly that the school and the superintendent need to look into their policies on bullying and, you know, figure out what they're doing wrong. But I feel like I owe Chief Glass an apology. I may have come across like I didn't think that you guys were doing a good job, and that wasn't the case at all. I think you guys are doing a fabulous job, your whole department, and so I truly apologize. Like, that was not my intention at all, so I apologize, and that was my other. That's it.
Are there any other others?
Chief, is Spicer, I see they're working up on 12th Street. Is that for the, making the difference in the sidewalks and streets? And
Can you say that again, sir? I missed the first half.
Spicer is working up on 12th Street. Is that for because of the kids getting hit and changing that area around?
Specifically to that or not? Maybe Jeff can answer that question.
In our capital improvement program, in a couple of years, we had scheduled to upgrade 12th Street from Oak up to about just past Elm Street. And with the recommendations that came out of the traffic study this summer, we are proposing, and will be proposing in the upcoming budget, that project get moved forward and be designed and constructed next year. And some timing of other projects helps that work out, but we would be able to implement all of the recommendations from the traffic study if that does get approved. So the work that Spicer's doing is in anticipation of that.
Okay. No.
Well, no other others, so
I'll make the motion, we go into closed session.
I'll second.
I need a roll call vote.
Okay. Councilmember Bachman.
Yes.
Mayor Beaton.
Yes.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sullivan.
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Martin Pontiac.
Yes.
Motion approved. We're back in open session.
We're adjourned.
Okay.